Okay, good day everyone. This is Naat Loubser once again with our South African Strength and Conditioning Association podcast, and in our fourth edition um, of the information that we're trying to set out there and trying to change the world one episode at a time. I've got with me again Pieter Terblanche, so we're going to have a nice chat today. Pieter's going to take it away and give us a bit of a background on what we're going to be talking about today, and hopefully we're going to get some exciting stuff done again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Naat. Again, thanks for the invite. I hope you guys are listening and I hope you find it relevant in your industry in strength conditioning. I think today is just a bit of an informal chat with Naat. I just want to have a chat about assessment. So how do you test? How do you profile your athletes? And the value of it. I think that's one of the things we sometimes miss. It's something that we don't discuss, or it's almost like something that we hide from the other persons around us. So not maybe from your side. So if you look at and think about the concept of profiling or testing your players, well, what comes to mind?
So for me, usually it usually means start of preseason. It's the first thing that comes up. So it's usually the start of a season, and in some sense, it's always also an end of a season. And I know in a lot of places, a lot of the strength conditioning coaches might have to fight for time to be able to do this. But even if you have to fight for time, which some people don't always think about, is if you have training sessions with your athletes and with your groups, then you also have time to test. So you don't have to have 3 days to do all the full batteries of tests. So I think, yeah, that's one of the things. And then obviously, for me, the way I see it, testing is for me to find a baseline of where people are. A lot of people look at the norms, and I'm not saying we have to ignore the norms and the standards that's out there. So you have to set your high level of standards that you want. But the main thing is to start from a position I see as this is where we are starting. And not to try and break your back and thinking, oh, everyone's at a very poor level or whatever the case may be when you're starting to test. For me, it's more, this is where we're at, this is where we're starting. Then we're going to put an intervention in place. And with the intervention, we want to basically see, and I want to see how successful my intervention was at the end of a certain period of time, whether it's 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks or every 6 weeks or every quarterly report or whatever, however many times you're going to be doing it. So that's, for me, it's kind of also a benchmark of measuring my intervention that I put together to improve the player's performance and possibly change their profile if I'm going to be doing profiling. So I've at the moment I'm working on setting up my battery of tests for a load velocity profile from all the players, and then also speed reserve profile for the players that we're going to be doing. So, and then obviously after a certain period of work, the intervention, I want to see, have they improved, have they not improved? So that for me is the key thing that I've kind of look at and think of when I think of testing.
Thanks, Naat. I want to jump in there and I just want to add, I think it's true. I think especially with years to come, sometimes we look at just the norms. But I do feel it's the same. I think the profile for me in the beginning is specifically just to check where the athlete's at. And that includes obviously physical performance, but also injury in here. And the basic sometimes is just, I want to see how well they move. But for me, there's mainly 4 elements that I normally want to profile of an athlete. And those are normally movement, how efficient and how well do they move. There's a part of, I want to assess their recovery capabilities or knowledge or scope of what they've done before, and that might include rehab or injuries. I want to obviously profile nutrition, so an element that I think is quite important for their growth and development, but also education. I think it's important to where do they come from and what do they eat. And lastly is, it's not new, but it's something we've been doing for years. I think the scope is just broadened with obviously EMG studies and scans, but the mind and the cognitive part of how does that person works, what makes him tick, and how can we capture their hearts there? Because at the end of the day, you're working with the human, with emotions, and a background and experience, and that's elements that all play a role in how we perform in the future. What's your thoughts on that, Naat?
Yeah, so I think if you're looking at all those kind of things, if you're able to do a profile on all of those things, it's very comprehensive if you are able to do that. And if you have tools to do that and to look at those kind of things, if you can cover the mindset and kind of like a mind profile or a brain profile, however people look at that, because you get a brain profile. That I know one of the professors here at the university has got a brain profiling thing, but it's not just to do with, it's not necessarily just the psychology, it's also got to do with concentration levels and mechanical aspects of the brain almost. And then nutrition, I mean, those are obviously key things, because the mind, I believe the mind is primary in anything that you're going to be doing, because it governs movement, it governs decision making, it governs speed, power, all those kind of effects. It's governed by the mind. I mean, everything you do, you can't do anything without your brain, basically, when it comes to the physical performance. And coincidentally, I know there's a lot of people and researchers out there that actually believe that I think one of the only, just trying to get the words right, but I think the main reason why we have a brain is so that we can move. I'll see if I can get that video that the one guy's talking about, and if I'm quoting it wrong, just forgive me, but it's quite a while back that I saw this. But if I remember correctly, he's talking about the reason why we have a brain is that so that we can move. So that's one of the primary things that the brain basically does is movement. And whether it's movement at a very small level or at a very big level, very high level, and almost everything that you're doing will probably translate in one way or another into some kind of a movement if the brain has got to do with it. So that's kind of the theory that the guy has there. And then if you're looking at nutrition, which is together with sleep, probably the primary thing for recovery and once again enhancing performance. So both of those things, the mental plus the nutritional side, is a very ergogenic component that if you can get a profile on that and educate on that, as you were mentioning, which is also quite important, which is a big part of what we're doing. I mean, if you're just looking at nutrition, we can't necessarily be at the player's house and make sure that he doesn't do the wrong stuff and that he does the right things. We can't always be there. So you need to educate them and have them in the right mindset to be able to follow through on what they're going to be doing with those kind of things. So those are things that's very, very important, but there's stuff that happens outside the field, outside the gym, which is a key factor in what performance is about as well. So that's actually, I think, is an extremely good thing to be able to look at that. So yeah, very well done there.
So I think for our side, for me, just to add on what you're saying, Naat, is for me, there's main two concepts in that mind bit. And the one is wellness. Wellness, it's not this fluffy thing in the air, but that's emotion and personality and how you respond to certain things. And you can even throw in the limbic system there. That's your fight and flight or stress hormone. And on the other side is almost like the frontal cortex, the memory, the hippocampus, the cerebellum, where movement and memory takes place. And I think the scope is just wide enough for us to take the mind, and we can maybe do a podcast on that. I'd love to delve in that neuromuscular ability that you're talking about and how to optimize that, because there's a process and there's so many things we learn. But also in essence, C part is it affects the way your athlete learns. It affects the way that he responds to how you coach. And unfortunately, that combination, almost that relationship between how he relates to your physical movement, emotional, personal wellness, fight and flight, all of that plays a role on how well you achieve your goals in your program. And I think one of the things we sometimes lack is I've seen many times guys who write outstanding gym programs. They are gurus in programs, and you just get a normal guy, but he's a person. He knows how to get the best out of people, and he takes a very elementary, basic, generic program, and he outplays the ones with these fancy programs, and it's just because they understand humans better.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And it's also very much the opposite that can happen. If you have an individual, a coach, that works with people, and he just has the ability to get nothing out of athletes, nothing, or the worst performances out of them. It's very much in the coaching community and with the players, and especially I've seen this in my experience this year, is the players, if you're working with a team sport, probably some individual sports also very much like that. A lot of the players and the coaches know that, and coaches that know this usually much more people orientated and much more player orientated, and you have to kind of want to play for the coach as well. So all of the players also themselves want to win. But if they have a coach and a coaching staff that's very supportive and that's a great part of the team, they really want to play for that coach. They want to get onto the field and they want to do well. They're really putting everything in there. And if they get a good relationship, if you have a good relationship with the coach, and you can go, you can get a lot more out of players. I know there's a lot of coaches that's in very small teams, smaller university setups, smaller team setups, and because they are just very much people orientated, they get so much more out of their teams and players purely because of that fact. So yeah, that's definitely a key thing. And some players, some coaches have got almost a natural profiling ability if they're speaking with players. So they'll speak with players and they'll be coaching them for a while, and they'll be able to figure out, okay, this player is. And if you speak to them, they'll tell you, they'll give you a profile. They might not even know it, but they'll give you kind of a psychological profile of this player as you ask them about this one. So they kind of already naturally able to kind of profile a player psychologically and the mental side of it. And they know that for this one, we need to do this, for this guy, we need to do that, and so forth. This guy, I can do this with this guy, is going to do well, but I can't do it with that guy, so I'm going to work with him. So I think that is a key factor. I mean, even in the gym as well, not just on the sports side, you need to take that into account. You need to be able to understand this is how you'll get the best out of your players in terms of their physical capacity and performance as well. So yeah, important key factor. Yeah.
Thanks, Naat. And I just want to allude to further. You spoke earlier about obviously the nutrition bit. I think important just to nutrition is the same way Pieter has our training and our weekly schedules and our end of our year. The information and education out there about nutrition, and I call it fuel for performance, is just as vital as that profile as is your movement and brain. And we'll talk a little bit about recovery, but I think it's so vital for you as an SNC to have a sit down. I'm not a key guy for diets, just 90% of the time, because athletes is not what they enjoy. It's not how they eat. It's not how they respond. But I am a very big key for sitting there down and asking them, listen, take a journal. It could be electronic. It could be a book of what you're currently eating. Work out their daily energy expenditures. Work out the physical expenditure. Set a goal for the target that you're currently in. To say that, hey, listen up, I want to build muscle, I want to lean body mass, I want to, whatever the goal might be. But nutrition, and especially as it progresses through the season and as it progresses with injuries or without, or fluctuations in load and management, I think nutrition is one profile that is vital for us to look at from the start and prioritize it just as we do our training.
Yeah, I mean, just a simple example that I do with the players, and this is probably the simplest, most elementary way that you can periodize nutrition, is what I, as a rule of thumb, try and get through to. So some of the players that's been with me for a few seasons know this quite well, and they're fine-tuning it a little bit better, and we're getting into more details with that. But as a rule of thumb, the most basic thing that I say is to the players, the day before the game, you almost double up. You can go for it. Go for it. And ideally, we're looking for carbohydrates for most of you, but go for it the day before the game. The day of the game, you go back to normal and even a little bit less in terms of the total amount of food. Because what I've seen is a lot of the guys they eat too much on the game day. They'll eat normal on the day before the game, and on the game day they'll eat too much sometimes. And some guys naturally don't want to even eat on a game day because they're stressed too much. But a lot of the guys, especially rugby players, they enjoy eating, so they sometimes eat too much on game day. So what I usually, as a rule of thumb, said the day before the game, we load up. That's when you put the fuel into the tank. The day of the game, you just want to make sure that you keep the fuel tank up. You don't need to fill it up too much. And also, you don't want to feel lethargic from eating too much food. Everyone knows what they feel like after a Sunday lunch. If they have a big family Sunday lunch, there's going to be some lethargy in there. You'll be a bit tired. But that being said, that's the basics of it. And then if we are fortunate enough to have a team meal on game day, that we provide the players with a meal before team day, on the game day, we'll usually try and get 3 to 4 hours before the game, we'll have a bigger meal. That's where our biggest meal will be. And then we'll have an hour to an hour and a half before the game. We'll give them a snack for topping up from that. And that's the basics, most basic that you can do. So even if you're not doing it in a team, 3 to 4 hours before is when you're probably going to have your last big meal, and then maybe top up. That's what that I usually advise to most of the players. And I always also speak to them and explain to them, if you know by now, some people know by a certain point, they know what works, what doesn't work. If they know that they shouldn't eat a snack an hour and a half before the game, makes them feel nauseous or funny or whatever, then don't. Then don't do that. But for most of the guys, they need to have a small top up just to make sure that you don't get into the game hungry when kickoff starts. You don't want to be hungry when kickoff starts. That's also the thing. So kind of like getting the meal timing right. And that's the most basic thing that that's the basic level that I start off with nutrition. And that's just nutrition in terms of game day performance. And then there's some other ways for guys who want to gain weight or gain muscle mass, and some other things for guys who want to lose body weight and fat, and journal. And then in that case, putting a journal is the first thing that I usually tell them. Write down what you eat for me, at least before we make any suggestions. Write down what you eat the next 3 to 5 days. You write down everything. If you take a small bite of something while you cook, you write that in. Everything you write that in, and we see what happens over 3 to 5 days. And from there on, I can give you some better information that comes through with that. So journaling for that long-term intervention is better. And then basic game week, that's my basic, like I said, the most basic level that I give nutritional advice for. So I don't know if you have a specific strategy that you maybe go with. Something.
No,
there's
I'm
various
100% with you. I think. Yeah, I think sometimes the fundamental for me is nutrition is just whatever gets measured improves. And there's different methods, and currently there's a lot of apps and applications and methodologies and stuff. But the basic is just know what you eat. I think it's important to know what you put in your mouth. There's amazing stuff currently that you can measure your total energy expenditures. And you can get really specific. It is always good if you do have the finances to get a nutritionist or dietitian or a performance specialist who can actually help you to establish your baseline, establish what's the next step. It's amazing how good response your body will have if you do give it the right stuff. So nutrition is one of the things I think it's vital for us to profile for each individual and have a baseline, like I said in the beginning. The second or the last thing, maybe not before you get to the last thing, is maybe recovery. So this is quite a tricky one because people say, "But well, how do I measure recovery? How do I create a baseline? How do I know how well someone recovers?" What will be your answer to that? How do we build a recovery or a recovery profile?
So I know there's some tests that a lot of the guys do, some cardiovascular tests that they look at the heart rate. So if you want to be really fancy, heart rate variability, I think is a big thing, but a lot of people don't have access to that. They don't have access to measure heart rate variability, but heart rate variability, I think is a great way if you have the tool and the ability to do that, because that's a good sense of nervous system recovery, plus your heart is the pump for the cardiovascular system. So that would give a very good indication, I think. And then heart rate variability is also something that needs to be done over a period of time. You can't just, it's not something that you do it for 2 days, then you say, oh, it works. So it also happens over time. So you need to put in a bit of effort and time to use that. So what I'm using at the moment, and also, once again, I've got access to the technology, but there's other ways of doing it. You don't have to also we keep forgetting the way things are going now. Almost everyone with a smartphone's got access to the technology. So if you have an iPad or iPhone, usually a lot of the sport science apps works on iOS most of the time. So if you have access to that, you also have the technology for a lot of the stuff, and some of it's for free. So very easy. But what I use is the counter movement squat jump or counter movement jump. So
We do the same.
I use that for that because there's I'll see if I can get the link to one of the studies, but there's a good study that was done in terms of explaining the sensitivity to effort and strain. And they compared the squat jump, which is different than the counter movement squat jump. Important to understand that if you're reading scientific literature, for those of you who enjoy reading or scientific literature out there. So it's important to understand there's a difference between squat jump and a counter movement jump or a counter movement squat jump. Not the same thing. So, but we'll get into maybe.
And I think it just to allude there, Naat, that obviously you need to know the mechanisms of fatigue, but fundamentally you want to be able to differentiate between the two, and you want to get a good neuromuscular profile. I think one that we shouldn't elude, especially if you don't have technology, is RPE is always a great way. It's been scientifically shown. It's simple to do. You don't need anything, and the science has just shown so many variabilities between and reliability to just using RP. You can make your own scale. You don't need to be fancy with that. It's literally just having a baseline to say that this is how you feel. This is how you feel the next day. How was your response to it, and how well did you recover?
Yeah, so RPE quite interesting.
But hardware availability, I agree, is one of the.
That's one of the.
Availability is one of the major ones. Sorry, not.
Once again, with that, if you have the technology with the heart rate variability, you can. RPE, great tool, and you can even go as far as if you take RPE for each session that you're going to be doing, you can take the RPE for the session times by the minutes the session was, and then it gives you a value on load. And then you can have a daily load, session load, weekly load. It's easy to put a spreadsheet together if you want to do that, if you don't have a specific tool for that. So you can, if you want to do that, a specific tool. And then what I usually do is I've got so the gym sessions at the moment with the system I've got, if you end the program, it asks you to give a rating out of 10, or RPE out of 10. So I rate the gym sessions at a slightly different scale than I do field sessions, conditioning, sport type sessions. Yeah, so on field sessions, it's out of 10. 5 is quite hard. 5, 6 is quite a hard session. On field and running type activities and sport type activities. 10 is obviously the hardest thing you've ever done in your life, almost, if you're rating it like that. But my gym sessions, the gym sessions I rate usually a 4 is kind of like a recovery type gym session, so it's like warm-up type weights. So my RPE for gym is related to how heavy the weight felt, and also linked in a way to a bit of reps in reserve to one way. So that's how so my weight training sessions, I do 5 out of 10 is warm up. So if you only do warm up sets, it's going to be 5 out of 10. If it's light exercises, we have a lot left in the tank, and you can go really fast and explosive for the weights. If you push, that'll be a 6. 7 will be a little bit heavier for that. 8 is the territory where 8 is usually the territory where it's at about 85% of maximum on a maximum strength type day, or even on power cleans and those kind of things. So 8 is usually when it gets to 85%, around about there. So usually the guys will rate on my system. They'll rate, if they rate about 8 or more, then it's usually on the days that I programmed at about 85% or more in terms of their 1 rep max values as well. So it's what I then can see with that is if one of the players says to me, listen, this felt like a 9 today or a 10, and I know this was like at the bottom end, 85%, then I know, okay, well, maybe a little bit tight, because I know it should have been an 8, not a 9 or a 10 on the gym workout today. So I just maybe need to look at that. So that's how I use the RPE system with gym sessions and then field sessions as such. Yeah, and then like I said,
and then the last thing, Naat, I think that's quite important to monitor, and my suggestion is to profile it for your athletes is sleep. We neglect the value of a proper sleep, a well-rested sleep, a deep sleep. Obviously, there's apps and applications you can use, but a basic number written down, a basic monitoring system that you can track it for your athletes. It could be an app, it could be a write down, it could be a whatever. But you just want a baseline, like I said, as a profile of sleep and sleep quality for your athletes. And we've obviously in the professional era, we have actually sleep sessions during the day when our athletes have multiple sessions where we recommend as much as we can. We even have sleep rooms that we've got sleep facilities for our athletes to sleep in. But fundamentally for our athletes, you just need them some downtime. Take the phone away, take the social media away. A room that's dark. There's no sound. It's weird, and no sound rooms. It's a weird concept. Water is a brilliant way. They do a lot of research on water and water recoveries, where there's different sounds in your the white noise and the black noise and there's grey noise that you can actually play on soon. But there's this unbelievable profile, and that's the bottom line we want to get to for today. Is just you need to have a profile for your athletes for rest and recovery, and obviously those are two different elements. As an umbrella, we all call it regeneration, but there's multiple factors that you can profile. But the key is just to have something that you can measure, and obviously over time that you can improve it. Yeah. And then lastly, Naat, I just want to jump in before we need to go, and I want to make it too long, but maybe we should set up a date for all this because it could be very specific. But physical assessment, I think physical profiling, this is what we believe is our heart of S&C, is how do we test. So maybe just for a few words on your side, Naat, how will you test movement?
So we've had two levels that I haven't done this in a while. There were some constraints with the rugby that we had to do this, but there are two levels of movements, two levels of movement profiling that we did. So the one level was done by the physiotherapist, and it is what she called a movement screening. She had a movement screening that she did, and she tested different types of muscle action in what is usually seen as a very elementary type movements. So it's a single leg pelvic lift at a specific knee angle to start off with, seeing how many reps they get left versus right, standing balance, proprioception type stuff. So very much the stuff that's focused on the rehabilitation side of it. And then she would have created a profile for each athlete with that then, and it gives them a score. It was either out of 60 or out of 100, but anyways, got a score, and then the higher score is bad and the lower score is better that they get. And then according to that, we'd have certain exercises as an intervention to try and improve restrictions and strengths and stability on that. With myself, I have few basic movement elements that I want them to be able to do. I'll see if I can put that on a sheet also and share this on the podcast in a link. So if I remember correctly, one of the movements, and most athletes battle with this one, is I had a kettlebell windmill in as one of the movements. So I expected them to be able to get a kettlebell windmill with a certain amount of weight at a certain amount of proficiency. So they need to be able to keep the knee locked, knee straight, elbow straight, touch the floor, get it back up. That's kind of like what I was looking for. Then I also had a hanging straight leg raise. They need to be able to do a hanging straight leg raise. I think it was between 5 to 10 repetitions with leg straight, and then also a loaded Cossack stretch. So a loaded Cossack stretch with a certain weight criteria. And then what was the other movements? Turkish get up. They had to be able to do a Turkish get up for 1 repetition or 3 repetitions each side. So Turkish get up, I use that also as part of my movement screening to see that they can do. So with the Turkish get up, I can actually get a lot of information in terms of various joints in the body on what they can do. And I had a few other ones that I think of, but those are the primary ones that I had in there in terms of basic movement efficiency. And then obviously I've got my strength stuff, which they need to be able to move well as well. With the strength movements, I think I also had a goblet squat in there. Goblet squat, certain depth, certain weight for certain reps. And then the strength test, which also kind of falls in with movement, is squats, deadlift, power clean, power snatch, those kind of movements. And then obviously I want them to be able to do a front squat efficiently, an overhead squat efficiently, and those kind of things. And most of the tests that I would do loaded usually, and I've got a specific resistance target that I also set on that. So it's not good enough that they can, it's great if they can do a kettlebell windmill, But if they're doing it with Miami Barbie's weights, then it doesn't really help that much. So yeah, great, but we need to be able to load that movement as well. So I like to use movements that can be loaded, because it's not a range of motion, it's a movement for me. So I want someone to be able to get into a movement and apply force in that movement. So the mobility aspect of it, not just the flexibility or a kind of like a reach as such, if I can put it that way. So those are the basics that I'm looking at. I also many years ago did the functional movement screen. So the functional movement screen movements, I did a lot of that, but I haven't done that in quite a while. Those type of movements, it's more into our physiotherapy screening at the moment. And if we work with a bike and it assists us more into their field, I've go more into the performance related stuff that I load and try and get a strong load in specific movements, and also some crawling movements is also starting to be put into my list of exercises that I screen with and want to build a profile with. And as of late,
So just
well,
to
there's a few
loop in, Naat, I know we're running in it out of time.
yeah,
Sorry, it's
yes, no
my
problem.
fault. I've got other assignments, but the areas that I think we can maybe you've got such vast knowledge about what to put in there. But for me, obviously, from the physical side, I think there needs to be a PARQ test just to get a basic of where they are with health and wellness. I think there needs a physical assessment, and I think that physical, you alluded to a lot of them, is obviously we need to look at strength. I think that's one area that you just alluded to, testing power, speed, agility, flexibility, and then lastly, I think that falls into that parameters, obviously energy systems is maybe, and we can allude maybe each one of those individually and say maybe examples of what we can test. But there's a few extras that we can add there to that. That currently I'm doing a bit of reading up and try to find out more. Now, I know you're an expert, especially with blood testing and the different responses of what the blood and endocrine system might have on performance. And I think we sometimes miss out. I have had interesting discussion with medical doctors that tell me that I don't test if there's no issue, but for performance, we need to look at blood. I think there's very vital stuff that you can pick up, especially with response to exercises.
Yeah.
I think genetic testing has become a vast new field. And it's not always so that you don't have or you have that genetic. It's great to have a laser focus rather than a shotgun, so that you have this, and in the sport we can improve XYZ. And then lastly, I think one that we can maybe do a whole day about is biomechanical profiling.
We can do a lot about that. Yeah.
So for you, for your body type, for how you look and how you move, how do we biomechanically assess you? How do we profile you? And then how do we help you to perform better?
Yeah, and then I think taking all of that together and seeing that what is the ones that's going to give the biggest bang for your buck almost, with either budget or time constraints that's coming in there. So yeah, so I think, and that's what a lot of the guys have to do. I mean, we can do a lot of things, but you have to understand what's going to give the biggest effect for the amount of effort and time we can put in, and what will give us the biggest bang for our buck, give us the best information. We don't just test for the sake of testing. I prefer to test to do something with it. I want to test something and I want to be able to program with it so that I can change that specific component. So not just testing for sake of testing. So yeah.
But I do think sometimes we as scientists, we sometimes bog down so much into that, what we do and what we want to improve. But a lot of what you do is influenced by so many other things. And I think it's important just to have as a start off, to have a great profile. Obviously, like Naat said, I do agree there's some elements that changes the buck for money, and get a performance profile for your athletes. It's something sometimes different. But obviously the interventions is crucial, but I do think it's important to have a profile, focus on the things that you could change now, depending on the period that you have the athlete, the focus of the training sessions, or the focus of this tournament goal competition that you might be entering. It might even be an athlete who's an Olympic athlete who only perform in 4 years, or it might be a rugby guy who needs to play a final in 2 months' time. So all of that, it depends on what your profile and how you do the profiling.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So again, thanks, Naat,
Thank you
for
very
your
much.
time. Thanks for the effort. I hope you guys find value from what we put together. If there's any questions, please pop us I don't know, Naat, a question or a
You can in the comments.
how do you do this
I know
on the comments or whatever.
In Spotify, there's an option for questions that they can ask, as well as on YouTube in the comments. The email address is also there. They're more than welcome to send an email if there's any questions that they have here. Awesome. Okay,
guys, hope you enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.